The first light of dawn stretched over the desert like a promise nobody trusted. Dust clung to everything, and the wind carried whispers of a town that barely existed on any map. She was lying there, bound, bleeding, and terrified. The cries of her newborn swallowed by the cruel morning. The world felt as if it had abandoned her entirely. She didn't even have the strength to curse it, only to pray that someone, anyone, would notice. The wooden walls of the barn smelled of sweat, hay, and old despair. She had been sold just hours after bringing her baby into the world, shackled by cold iron that bit into her skin. The man who had sold her had left with a laugh, satisfied that the transaction was done, leaving her and the fragile life she carried to fate, or to nothing. Pain tore through her chest as she tried to push herself up. Her arms protested against the chains, her body weak, but the infant's tiny cries forced her to keep going. There was no time for tears. She had to survive for him. She whispered to him in trembling tones, "Mama's here. Mama's not going anywhere." Outside, the desert roared with life, indifferent to her suffering. A hawk circled overhead, its sharp eyes catching movement below. And that movement was him, a lone figure on horseback, riding with a calm that belied the storm around him. A cowboy, not the flashy kind that wore a gun for show, but the kind that had scars in places nobody could see. He noticed the shackled woman and the bundle beside her. His horse slowed, sensing the urgency as he studied the scene from a distance. The wind carried the metallic scent of blood. Something in him tightened, a memory of loss, of helplessness that had been too familiar. He dismounted without a sound, boots sinking into the sand, and approached with deliberate care. "Ma'am?" His voice was rough but steady, cutting through the morning stillness. She froze, unsure if she should plead or stay silent. Fear was a constant companion, sharper than the iron that held her. "Please, don't come near," she whispered, eyes wide, body trembling. "I ain't here to hurt you." He crouched, keeping his hands visible. "I'm just a man passing by, but I reckon you need help." She measured him with suspicion that had taken root deep inside her. In a world where men like her captors existed, anyone could be the next nightmare. What do you want?" she asked, her voice cracked. "To help, and maybe to buy your freedom." He hesitated, then added, "If you'll let me." She stared at him, disbelief mixing with hope. The chains clinked as she shifted slightly, trying to move closer to her baby. "Freedom? You can do that?" "Not with words, but with gold." He tipped the worn leather satchel hanging from his shoulder, showing her the coins glinting inside. "Enough to make him pay, and then some. You deserve better than this." The first hook of hope pricked her heart. Could it really be that simple? Money. To undo what the cruelest hands had done? She wanted to believe, but fear held her tighter than the chains. I don't know you." "Doesn't matter," he said quietly, almost to himself. "Doesn't matter. You're getting out of here. That's what counts." He worked the locks on the chains with a precision that spoke of experience. Minutes stretched, each one an eternity. Finally, the shackles fell away, and she collapsed forward, clutching her child, tears mixing with sweat and blood. "Thank you," she whispered, voice broken, soul still shaking. The cowboy nodded, brushing the dust off his coat. "You're welcome. But we ain't out of the woods yet." They moved slowly, the baby cradled against her chest, until she could walk without staggering. Every step was a battle, every shadow a potential threat, and the desert seemed endless. You can ride with me," he offered finally, pointing to the horse. "I'll get you somewhere safe." She hesitated. Trust didn't come easy, but the alternative was staying in the open, where the next cruel hand could find them. Finally she nodded, as she climbed onto the horse behind him, gripping the saddle tightly. The wind whipped against her face. For the first time since her child's birth, there was movement in the world that felt like freedom rather than fear. The sun climbed higher, painting the desert in harsh yellows and reds. They rode in silence for a while, only the rhythm of hooves and the baby's quiet breathing between them. "Where are we going?" she asked finally. "Somewhere the law won't turn its back. Somewhere you can breathe without looking over your shoulder." He didn't say more, But she didn't need him to. The promise in his eyes said it all. The second hook came unexpectedly. Figures appeared on the ridge ahead. Riders, armed and ruthless, the same type that had sold her. She froze, heart hammering. "Hold on," he muttered, reins tight in his hands. The cowboy's posture changed, calm turning into precision, experience sharpening into danger. They came down the slope fast, dust flying, the sun striking their silhouettes into near ghosts. Shots rang out. The baby stirred but remained quiet, somehow shielded by her mother's arms and the cowboy's own calculated movements. "Stay down!" he barked. Bullets grazed the horse, throwing sand, but his aim was deadly accurate. One by one the attackers fell back and the silence returned. She gasped, adrenaline shaking her body. You saved us. I told you. We ain't out of the woods, but we're getting there." By evening, they reached a small homestead hidden in a canyon, smoke rising from a chimney. Chickens wandering, dogs barking. A woman came out, wide-eyed but welcoming. "You're safe here," the cowboy said. "Nobody comes through this canyon without leaving a trail we can follow." She finally let herself breathe. The baby slept peacefully in her arms, and for the first time, she allowed a smile to touch her lips. "What's your name?" she asked, curiosity piercing the exhaustion. "Just call me." "A man who didn't turn away," he said. Days passed, and the homestead became a sanctuary. Word of the brutal market faded, replaced by whispers of a cowboy who bought a mother's freedom at dawn. She learned his scars weren't just physical, they were memories of battles fought in silence, fights for people who couldn't defend themselves. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky with fire, she watched him repair a fence. He looked up, noticing her gaze, and nodded. "You saved me, my baby. I owe you more than gold could ever repay," she said softly. "Don't owe me nothing," he replied, voice low but steady. "Just live. That's all the thanks I need." The final hook hit when a rider approached from the canyon's entrance, dust trailing, the wind carrying tension. She froze. Had danger found them again? But the cowboy's hand rested on his holster, calm as ever. The rider slowed, recognizing him, tipping a hat in respect. For the first time she realized the world was cruel, yes. But there were men who chose justice over greed, courage over fear. And she, bound and bleeding at dawn, had been given a second chance. Night fell over the canyon, stars scattered across the sky like scattered coins. She held her child close, feeling the heartbeat that had survived against all odds. The cowboy sat nearby, watching the horizon. Silence spoke louder than words. The story ended there, not with fanfare, but with a promise that even in the harshest lands, in a world ruled by cruelty and fire, hope could ride in on a lone cowboy's horse, and freedom could be bought not just with gold, but with courage and heart. And in the quiet she whispered to her child, "Sleep now, little one. Mama's safe, we're free, and we'll stay that way." The canyon held them in its embrace, dust settling, night deepening. Freedom had a name now, and it wasn't just the cowboy, it was survival, love and the dawn that always returned.